This is the super zoom. All you need is 3 shots: a close-up, a wide shot, and a medium shot. Keep the shot steady and make sure that you are always at the same height. Also, for the duration of the zoom, make sure that your talent is not moving. Then just put your wide and your medium shot into the timeline and make sure that you trim them in a way that they are as long as the zoom duration. For the close-up, you just make sure that you have the frame that you really want the video to continue with at the very end of the zoom duration. So right here. Then just deactivate the close-up track for now and click on the medium shot and lower the opacity by a tiny bit so you can see through it. Then just use the zoom knob in the transform panel to actually just scale it down so the clips align up perfectly. This will take you some tweaking, and you can also use the scaling option in the top left corner. But give it some work, because the more precise you are here, the better the end result will be. Finally, just go to the cropping panel and decrease the softness by a lot. Sometimes I go even full towards the left side. It just blends the image together with a wide shot. And then it looks like this. You can clearly tell that the shot is a bit too bright, so I adjusted it quickly here. And then you just repeat the process for the rest of the shots. Lower down the opacity, you scale it down, you line it up, and then you make sure that you soften the edges. And then finally you should end up with something like this. It looks a bit strange because it's soft when the zoom ends. So what we want to do is we keyframe the softness value. We make sure that we can completely see the image after the zoom duration, like this. And then the next thing we do is we put an adjustment clip in the timeline. This is the only part where we need Fusion, just a tiny bit. Just open the Fusion page, press Shift and Spacebar and type Transform. Here we can use a zoom with motion blur, which is really important. Just increase the shutter angle a bit, and then we go towards the controls. In this case, I'm zooming in by 200% and I adjust the pivot. The pivot is just telling the program where it should land on with the zoom. Then just keyframe the center and the size value and go towards the end of the zoom. And then just type like, I don't know, 12, 13, something like this should do the deal. So it's actually zooming completely into it. Don't worry, it looks a bit pixely. That's completely normal. We will solve that later. And then you end up with something like this. Doesn't look too bad. Still a bit of work to do, but we'll get there. First of all, go into the spline menu and select the size, and then just highlight all the keyframes and press this move out button in the left corner. And then we just use these 2 knobs here to make sure that the animation is easing in and easing out. The next thing I'm going to do is I'm searching for this zoom blur, which I also just add into the adjustment clip. Just keyframe the zoom amount value. I usually go from like -1 to 0, and then you will end up with something looking like this already. Now, what you might notice is that in the end frame, you can clearly see that there is a little bit of a rough edge. So we use the softness button again, and we just keyframe it in a way that only in the last frame it's actually the real image, before it just stays soft in the edges. And then we're almost done. We just adjust the colors a bit. I put like a lot on the adjustment clip, and then we have a quite cool animation already. But as I said, what you're going to notice is that the last frame is kind of pixely. So what you want to do is you go to your timeline settings and you untick this little button here, and then you make sure that the whole timeline is like 8K Ultra HD, and then you also want to render it out. Yeah, so if you ever do like a zoom animation in a bigger timeline, just make sure to render it out and then set your timeline back to HD, or your computer will die. That was it. See you next time.